Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was a mighty, mighty king. Now, this king was no ordinary man. He was a warrior, a poet, an intellect, a gifted musician, a man amongst men. And when he walked into a room, he carried an aura, a presence. The woman would weep and the men were envious. So as sometimes happened with men of such power, such wealth, such authority, the king also enjoyed the companionship of beautiful women. And he had many, many wives. And with each of these wives, he bore a number of children. One day, one of his sons called Kaya became obsessed with his half-sister born of a different mother. He claimed to those around him to have fallen in love with his sister, and he plotted to entice her to his home. When she arrived, and despite her anguished protests and appeals for mercy, he overpowered her and he brutally ravished and took advantage of her. She returned home broken, pained, and disgraced. And she told her older brother by the same mother, a chap called Panache, about what had happened to her. Now Panache, who was an ambitious and ruthless man, was furious. He chose to bide his time though, and he plotted vengeance. 2 years later, Panache invited all his siblings, including Kaya, to a great feast. And when Kaya was full of food and drunk with wine, Panache's men thrust their swords into his belly, into his heart, and they murdered him. When the king received news of these events, he was greatly pained. Panache was banished from the kingdom. After many years had passed, the king allowed Panache to return. And as time passed, Panache became more and more power hungry, more and more ambitious. Spotting a gap between the king and the people, he plotted a coup, and he successfully overthrew his father as king. The country descended into a civil war, with the king's forces on one side and Panache's on the other. In the ensuing battle, the king's forces won, and in the process, Panache was captured and killed. Now, as the victorious forces returned to camp and the king heard the news of Panache's death, he fell to his knees, wailing and weeping. "Oh, my son, Panache! My son, Panache! I wish to God I died instead of you. Oh, Panache, my son, my son!" On hearing the king weep and wail, the soldiers who had fought for him fell silent. The ecstasy of victory was dashed into mourning, and they became meek and ashamed as if they had lost the battle. Seeing what was happening, the king's top general, a mighty man by the name of Bongo, approached the king. He spoke his truth and said, "Today you have humiliated all your men who have just saved your life, the lives of your other sons and daughters and your wives. You love those who hate you and hate those who love you. Now go out and encourage your men. I swear, if you don't go out, not a man will be left with you by nightfall." General Bongo effectively gave the king an ultimatum: to serve the needs of the nation as a king should, and not his own needs or simply those of his family. If he failed in this primary duty, he was going to be abandoned. The king listened, and despite his anguish, the king got up, took his seat by the gateway, and encouraged and led his men and his nation. That is the price of leadership. There's no doubt you'll have to pay it. And the currency to make payment will be those things that are most dear to you. Be careful what you wish for. Be careful of becoming a leader. If you lead well, serve your purpose, and stay true to your calling, it will come at a cost, and there's a price you will pay. Oh, my son Panache, my son Panache, I wish to God I died instead of you. Oh, Panache, my son,